A horse walks into a space. A person walks in. Before anything is said or done, something shifts. Ears forward or back. Tension rises or drops. The entire dynamic changes in seconds. It seems like the horse is just reacting to what the person does. But researchers just discovered something that completely changes that picture. Your horse isn't responding to your actions. It's reading something specific in how you sound. Something you're probably not even aware you're broadcasting. Stay with me. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what your horse hears in your voice. Today we're talking about voice recognition. Let's start with something most riders already sense but can rarely explain. There's a difference between the ride where everything flows, where your horse is forward, attentive, willing, and the ride where nothing quite clicks. Same horse, same arena, same exercises. Different day, different outcome. What most people adjust is what they do. The aids, the exercises, the timing. What they rarely examine is what they sound like. What energy they're carrying into the stable. What their voice is already communicating before they've put a foot in the stirrup. Because your horse started reading you the moment you walked in. Researchers in Italy and France set out to test exactly this. They played recordings of human voices to horses, voices those horses had interacted with before, and measured the brain response using EEG electrodes while also tracking ear position and behavior. The methodology was precise. Each horse had previously interacted with 2 different handlers over a series of sessions. One handler used consistently calm, positive approaches, gentle contact, patient timing, low-stress handling. The other used the same horse, but with a more negative interaction profile. After the conditioning period, recordings of both voices were played back to the horses, with no person visible, in a controlled setting. The results were clear. When horses heard the voice associated with past positive experiences, their left hemisphere activated, their ears came forward, and their EEG showed gamma oscillation patterns associated with positive arousal and focused attention. When they heard the voice associated with past negative experiences, the right hemisphere activated, ears moved backward, and the horses showed the neurological signature of a negative emotional state. They weren't just recognizing the voice, they were retrieving the emotional memory attached to it. Every time. The brain doesn't just hear the voice, it immediately cross-references it against everything that voice has ever meant. What makes this finding particularly significant is the combination of behavioral and brain-level data. The ear position alone would be suggestive. The EEG alone would be interesting. Together, they confirm something horse people have long observed. Horses carry a read on the people they interact with, encoded at a neurological level, not just a behavioral one. A second study from a team in the UK went further. Researchers played horses' recordings of human nonverbal vocalizations, specifically laughter and growling, with no other cues present. No face visible. No person in the space. Just the sound. Horses who heard the growling adopted a freeze posture for significantly longer, held their ears forward in the vigilance position, and made fewer ear movements overall. The laughter produced the opposite pattern. More relaxed posture, a right ear bias toward the sound, and indicators of a positive evaluation. What this means is that horses are reading emotional valence from pure vocal tone. Not words, not context, not familiarity, just the acoustic properties of the sound. A stressed voice, a frustrated voice, a flat and irritated voice are not neutral. The horse processes them as signals and responds to them accordingly. A separate study added a third layer. Researchers showed horses pairs of animated facial expressions, one depicting joy and one depicting anger, while simultaneously playing a vocalization that matched one of them. Horses consistently looked longer at the image that didn't match the voice. The face said one thing, the voice said another, and the horse noticed the contradiction. A more recent study added one more dimension. Horses with poorer welfare conditions, restricted housing, frequent contact with many unfamiliar riders, limited social stability showed stronger reactions to negative emotional voices. Compared to horses in better welfare conditions, these reactions were significantly stronger behaviorally and physiologically. Horses with more stable human relationships and better living conditions reacted more calmly and showed more measured interest in positive voices. Brain activity reflected these differences at the EEG level. The researchers make an explicit point about what this means. How a horse responds to your voice is not fixed. It depends, in part, on the quality of its daily life and the consistency of its human relationships. A horse in chronic stress is already running hotter. It's already scanning more vigilantly for threat signals. When a tense voice arrives, the system overreacts, not because of that voice in isolation, but because of everything that came before it. Which means the question isn't only what are you saying, it's also what kind of baseline are you asking your horse to hear you from. So what does any of this mean in practice? The first application is consistency between your voice and your body. The research shows that horses integrate multiple channels simultaneously: posture, facial expression, vocal tone, and the congruence between them. You cannot manage one channel and ignore the others. If you're rushing, your voice will carry that even when you're trying to sound calm. If you're frustrated, it will be in your exhale before you've opened your mouth. Slowing down before you enter the stable isn't a soft suggestion. It's the beginning of the communication. This also applies to the sounds you make during groundwork and riding. A voice that is quieter, lower in pitch, and delivered at a slower pace consistently produces lower stress responses in horses than a sharp, clipped, or high-pitched voice. This isn't about volume. A whispered command delivered with tension carries more cortisol-triggering information than a normal voice delivered with calm. The horse is reading the prosody, the rhythm, the pitch, the rate, not just the decibels. The second application is to pay attention to your horse's reaction when you first arrive, not when you start working. The initial response, ears forward or back, body oriented toward you or slightly away, tension in the neck or a low dropped head, is your horse's memory-based response to the voice and presence you carry. Most handlers walk straight past that signal. It's worth pausing for it. Third, the voice matters during work, and not just for sounds you make intentionally. A rider who mutters under their breath when something goes wrong, who sighs heavily at mistakes, who lets frustration into the rhythm of their breathing, is producing information. The horse is tracking it. It doesn't know you're annoyed at yourself. It only knows what the signal means in its own accumulated experience of you. Fourth, the management context matters. A horse that lives in reasonable social conditions, with consistent human contact and adequate turnout, is neurologically better positioned to hear your voice accurately. A horse in chronic restriction is more reactive to negative signals and less responsive to positive ones. If you're working on communication, you're also working on everything that surrounds the communication. That last point connects to something the research makes clear. The history matters. A horse that has mostly experienced you as calm, consistent, and predictable will interpret ambiguous signals more generously. A horse that has experienced tension and unpredictability will weight the same signal differently. Trust, in the neurological sense, is built through exactly this kind of accumulated history. And voice is one of the primary channels through which that history gets deposited or eroded. That history also explains why some horses are significantly easier to work with for one person than another. Same horse, same training, different handler. The voice, the state, the accumulated record, all different. The horse is responding to the relationship, not just the moment. One nuance worth naming: this research doesn't mean you need to perform calmness you don't feel. Horses are integrating too many signals simultaneously for surface-level performance to hold up. What the findings point to instead is something more honest. The state you bring into the stable is part of the training, not something separate from it. That's not a burden. It's information. And information is always easier to work with than mystery. What does your horse do when you walk in? And if this raises questions about the other signals your horse is reading from you, the video on body language and stress recognition is linked right here. Subscribe if you haven't already. New video every week.